Hello and welcome. You're watching this episode of In Conversation. I'm Godfrey Mutizwa. From the west of the continent, I'm joined by my colleague Kenneth Ibomo. Now today we are talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area, and it will require many vectors and actors to take off successfully. Now, one concept that's being pushed by the private sector is the idea of trade corridors. To help us understand what this is and how it would work, we are joined today by Ambassador Anna Tibaijuka, the Chairperson of Travaco. Ambassador, thank you for your time. I want to begin with a definition so people understand the concept we're trying to push here. We all know we need the AfCFTA to work and to work with the participation of the private sector. How would the trade corridors facilitate this?
You see, Africa is a vast territory, and with the passing now of the Free Trade Area Agreement on 9th of July, we are able now to promote cross-border trade and investment. And African resources cannot just be, compartmentalized into administrative territories. So the TransAfrican Value Corridor, or Travaco, is seeking to bring all African resources, both human and also physical resources in terms of minerals, together so that people can invest together, so that you can raise investment from what we call patient capital, from the African people, from the diaspora, from people of goodwill, to invest across African borders, because Africa has resources, but it has never tapped those resources. So the concept is to have broad infrastructure development, which then help facilitate access to all these resources that are lying in Africa.
Yeah, so I am sitting in Johannesburg, but originally I am from Zimbabwe. And during the early years of my development in the journalism industry, I remember us writing about the Maputo Trade Corridor. And what I remember was that this was a railway line that ran all the way from Harare onto Mutare, then through Mozambique onto the port of Beira. How would this corridor that you are talking about work? Is this something similar? I want you to sketch for us what it would look like.
Yeah, the corridor would be like, basically it's infrastructure, physical infrastructure, economic infrastructure. As you said, you have to open up Africa. Actually, since the onset of the colonial era, the idea was always to open up Africa to exploit its resources. But the TransAfrican Value Corridor will be open up Africa to develop economic hubs inside Africa for Africans. So you really need railway lines, you need the airports, hubs, you need, for example, air transport, you need water transport, but also you need industries, basically putting up economic growth nodes inside Africa along these trade routes. So a value corridor is, of course, a trade route. You cannot develop without trade because you want to produce surpluses, which then you sell to others. So to facilitate the exchange of African goods and services, but also for the benefit of Africans themselves, first and foremost.
All right, Professor Anna, Kenneth here from Lagos. I'm trying to understand what features of this trade corridor set it apart from the other development corridors that have been out there before it.
First of all, it would be like this is really equity financing, because you are trying to tap the the investment of the equity holders, the private sector. But then the difference will be that these are integrated sort of investments. So the people who are contributing to the corridor itself, in terms, for example, look at a railway corridor. You can link Africa from the port of Tanga in my country, Tanzania, to the port of Banana on the DRC. So there you need, along the line, this railway then will create possibilities to put up different investment centers along this railway. So the railway then becomes, the railway corridor becomes a value corridor. It is a value corridor which will be linked to farms, which would be linked to mines, which would generate petrochemical industries, etc. So really, you are, when you say the value corridor, you are emphasizing the importance of value in terms of financing, but also value in terms of the benefits to the people in the corridor. Otherwise, you have all these railway lines and roads, which are really mechanisms of extraction of the resources out of Africa instead of integrated development of the African peoples themselves.
All right, but let's look at the design now and, of this project and what the key components of what you've set out to achieve.
Yeah, what we have set out to achieve is, first of all, to popularize and disseminate this information, because it cannot be business as usual for Africa if you want to transform the continent. So a Trans-African value corridor is also seeking to transform the continent, and I'm emphasizing that the benefit has to go to the continent itself. So you don't want investment projects, businesses to bypass the Africans. And from the outset, this was never the case. It was really an extractive type of investment. But this one is integrated. And it wants also to harness the little capital that the African peoples have, which have put up a market mechanism through the stock exchange for people to buy into this investment. So Travaco is seeking to raise capital both inside Africa, but also from the diaspora. Now I am not aware of any initiative of scale where the African diaspora, for example, has been able to put in funds. So Travaco is seeking to link the African on the continent with the African diaspora and create wealth, because of course, Africa's resources, the resources we have is ourselves, our people. But our people also now must be linked. Our people in diaspora and our people on the continent must be united also in terms of exploiting and utilizing the African resources.
Yeah, Professor, my hair is tingling as you speak, because I am imagining this vast opportunity that is opening up for people of African origin. But at the same time, I'm scared because you are saying the little capital that Africans have, and yet the scale you're talking about here suggests billions and billions of dollars. So give us a sense. How much would be required here? What sort of timeframes are we talking about in terms of implementing it and getting it off the ground?
Yes. Well, I think in terms of resources, the initial requirement for resources is not all that huge. If you have something like $500 million, you would be able, as a starting point, you would be able, first of all, to sell the idea. Because you see, the challenge for us in Travaco is that we must also rally the African leaders to understand this concept, but also to support it. Because, of course, African natural resources are in the hands of governments. So you need African governments, African leaders, African presidents, the African Union, and all our centers of cooperation to understand the concept and then to support it. And you will be surprised because using market mechanisms, if you are well organized, we should not underestimate the strengths of the Africans when they are united, both across borders, but also within borders, so that people would be able to buy into Travaco, but of course also the African, the capital with the African diaspora, which is also plenty. And in this regard, I would like to say that when we link up with, for example, Ambassador Arcana and the Diaspora Institute, to provide a platform, a mechanism through which African can finally link up together. At the moment, really, it doesn't work. We do it in conferences occasionally, we try our best, but I think this is now the time when we bring our equity financing together, because the money is not with governments, the money is in equity. The money is in equity, and I think this is what has been missing for Africa to break out of the colonial, bondage in which we still find ourselves.
Yeah, so this is what is slightly making me scared. Maybe scared is not quite the right word, but I doubt grows in my head, because you are talking about $500 million, and I'm thinking that's a lot of money. But you have been in the UN system, so you've used these big figures. You've been a member of parliament as well and a minister. But I want to talk about the specific mechanisms of how you are going to be able to get Africans to contribute this money, because I am sitting in Johannesburg, you are in Dar, Kenneth is in Lagos, there's somebody somebody sitting in Nairobi and someone in Cairo, and I am thinking, how are we going to use our stock exchanges to raise this money? Professor, help me understand.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are going to do what other people have been doing for how they get money, including from us. Because once Travaco starts trading, the shares of Travaco starts trading on these stock exchanges in the different countries, then we have a mechanism to bring in this capital. You see, but the starting of point is where selling the idea, building trust for Travaco, so that people can believe that this act can work. People cannot believe in anything if they don't understand and see the problem. You see, so $500 million is of course a lot of money, but it's also not much money, as you say. If you have been working for the United Nations like myself, I've been working for UN agencies for housing, I've been dealing with millions. But what I'm trying to say, millions of dollars, but what I'd like to say is the idea, the understanding, and also the confidence, because also when a little bit of anger maybe. People say, no, it cannot be business as usual. We cannot continue to be the center of extraction. We must also be a rallying point where capital comes in and capital stays there and generates wealth. Of course, finally, every participant will benefit. But the mechanism is there. I think what we are lacking, the most difficult thing, is understanding what we are trying to do.
All right, but Professor Anna, I'm a little curious here also. I'm trying to understand that how a private sector-led initiative like this is going to, is designed to deal with the issues around political will. Like you rightly mentioned, they're going to be talking to a lot of governments and trying to get their commitments into this. But I'm trying to understand what type of contract that you have that is going to bind this to make it lasting.
First of all, this thing must be credible, as I said. So this is, of course, the organization is a legal organization. And we are hoping that with the help of the Diaspora Institute in the US, for example, and other people, finally also Europe and other places, they will have their own clubs, so call them tribes, centers, group investment, because you have to trust confidence, you have to put up mechanisms of oversight, you have to have the proper board, you must have, basically monitoring and evaluation of this, initiative. It is a board initiative. It is a new idea. And it will also be calibrated along the way as we learn more. But there is no doubt that we are not running a Ponzi scheme or anything. So once, there will be proper oversight, and in whichever country you base this, we are now headquartered in Uganda, Kampala. That's where our Chief Executive Officer, Ben Benunura, is based. And right here, I am myself in Tanzania. But this is a project, this is an open project, it's a legal project. Like any company, this is a company, it will be formed as a company. People will buy into the company. People will invest into the investment company that will be created. And the investment company, then you will have a fund manager who follows the rules, I think, to start with, of the United States, but also the countries in which we shall be operating. So this is not something that is going to be run by a group of people, who are not regulated, no.
And Ambassador, this is not something that is going to be a short race. This is no 100-meter race. We don't need Usain Bolt here. We need the Ethiopian marathon runners, from what you are saying. I want to refer to a concept that you talked about earlier. You said what we require is patient capital. Please help me understand. What is this?
Well, patient capital means people taking a long-term view of things. For example, let us look at ourselves, the African investor. We Africans on the African continent. At the moment, some of us, we don't have all that money to save. So, but we do have $1,000 or something to be able to buy a share into Travaco. And really, to be patient, we're not expecting, for the dividend at the end of the year. We are saying, let us see how this thing develops. So, but also the international system, the diaspora people, who really want to see Africa rise out of our situation, sustainably. They will also be investing into their own hubs, which then come as groups and invest in Travaco. And then we start these huge projects. You see, if you are going to have value corridors with different projects, portfolio projects, you can have mining, you can have fishing, you can have agriculture, because all these resources are there. You can livestock production, etc. You will require people who really first of all, buy into this ideal initiative, because also there is a lot, I must admit that you also need, the moral, the desire to see us move, to see us catch up. If you look at, for example, China, the way China finally was able to rise, China was closed, it was under lockdown for 70 years under Mao Zedong, but it was organizing itself. So Africa also must organize itself. So we are not looking for predatory or extractive capital, which comes in quickly, makes big profit. Africa is a place where you can have set a % yield in 1 year. This is not the business of Travaco. It is the business of where you invest for the long term, but knowing that 10, 15 years down the line, you will have transformed the environment. So there is a whole issue of education, the whole issue of, general literacy, financial literacy, for example. You know, the kind of things that haunt Africa. Look at, for example, the monetary system. We would have, we shall also be having our own maybe digital currency, because it is something that is rising, and Africa again is on the tail end of things. Different countries are putting up their own digital currencies. We are not yet even understanding what these digital currencies, which are now emerging, mean. But we continue, for example, to depend on the system as it is. But is this system meant for us? Ever since the abandonment of the gold standard, for example, in 1972, I think it was President Nixon who did that. We have banked on the US dollar. This is now our main currency, reserve currency. But really, if you look at a situation like today, we have now COVID-19, the economy of the whole world was shaken. But clearly, how did it hit Africa? So when we are talking about the Travaco master plan, the Travaco master plan goes beyond railways and roads. It also looks at the general monetary system, the international system, economic system as it works. We must really understand it and try to position Africa afresh.
All right, but Professor Anna, two things I'm curious about as well. One, I'd like to know the value of commitments that this project has so far received, and also the type of incentives that you have for the key players in the corridor anchor towns.
This is a long-term project. As I said, we are looking for patient capital, but also I could talk about patient labor. So you see, this is a group of African intellectuals and enthusiasts. We are on the continent, so we are at the design stage of things. But also, in order to get organized, we have not been rushing to look for, quick money. So we are really self-reliant, a group of self-reliant. We have some of the best minds of Africa on this project. For example, our Chief Executive Officer, Benny Benonura, is one such a guy. But at the moment, he is working patiently. So we have patient expertise. So how much money have we mobilized? We are operational. Travaco is established, it is operating through self-reliance. Because if you are looking for patient capital, it means also you yourself must also put in your own contribution. So at this stage, we are finalizing the conceptualization plan. We have linked up with the Diaspora Institute in the United States, and we are really hoping that through Ambassador Arcana, we shall also be able to get then what we can call the seed capital to get this thing moving. And the starting of point, of course, is to put in content value into the project portfolio. For example, I am myself in a country where we have lots of minerals, but our local people, we are not really able to buy into these mines, into these natural resources that then are taken up by basically extractive capital, which is coming from outside. So Travaco will be a rallying point of capital that is going to assist us to access our resources and keep them. So how much money we have raised, I'm not going to put a figure on that, because I'm going to say we need $500 million. And we are hoping that once our partners in the United States, in Europe, those who buy along this thinking, the African diaspora, we should be able quickly to finalize the structure.
Professor, you've confused me a little bit. I thought this thing was for Africans, only Africans. No? Who are the partners? Who else is able to invest in this?
This thing is for Africans and the African diaspora to start with. Now, nothing is final because you see, in this way, don't exclude everybody. And I can say that you can add with people with patient capital, people of goodwill, you know, wherever they are. But to start with, we are starting with ourselves, the Africans, also our African diaspora, and then we carry it from there.
And we are going to control it. We will not cede control of this thing to someone, say, in China, who has got patient capital and sees the value of this thing, because we have already seen what they are trying to do with that road and Silk Road, what you call it, Silk Road, that they are trying to throw around the world.
Yes. Well, we are saying, look here, I am basically retired Under Secretary General of the United Nations. I am now talking to you from my village here in Bukoba, Tanzania. So we are not people who are in there for a quick buck or anything like that. But having said this, we believe that the young people joining in the African diaspora, listening to me, listening to us, will soon come in, because you don't need, you see, technology has changed everything. With technology, with the stock exchange, you don't need all that big money. You see, it will all add up. We have an African saying that drop by drop, the bucket will be full. That's number one. But also we want control. We are not going to allow people to come in and start dictating over us. We believe we are opposed to the supremacy of capital as such, because the natural resources that are exploited in Africa, for example, land, we shall be promoting things like land for equity. You have the capital, we have the land. So we should really meet each other together. So it's a new partnership for Africa, but also for the world, because together we shall succeed. And I think there is also a lot of goodwill outside there in the world that would like to see real change in Africa. But it is for the Africans themselves now to mobilize, to popularize, to campaign, as we are doing, for these new ideas.
All right, Professor Anna, I'm trying to now look at the development outcomes that you're trying to get out of this as well, especially for the economies of countries involved in Eastern and Central Africa.
The economies in East and Central Africa, if I understood the question, because you see, this is the starting point in terms of opening up this territory, the corridors of East and Central Africa. I said from the west to connecting the east coast, on Indian Ocean to the Atlantic. If you look at connecting in Cameroon, so we do have already some conceptualized corridors in the master plan with which we could start. And as I said, look at the country like our DRC, the Congo. Basically, it remains really a closed territory. You see, if you don't have aeroplanes going in there to lift cotton for making manufacturing, mobile phones, you really don't have fast trains, standard gauge railways, which would become like almost capillaries running around, connecting people of different countries, but of different regions within a country. That is not there. So you would be developing that. But as I said before, of course, working with the African leaders, African presidents, we are hoping to have a club of Travaco presidents, for example, and also working under the structure of the African Union, but also as a private sector initiative. With that dynamism, we are looking for champions. So the people of this region, as a starting point, will be able to benefit. But of course, Travaco is not only limited to East and Central Africa, although it has to start somewhere, but we are also looking up with West Africa, with Southern Africa, the SADC region, the COMESA area, you name it. So I would like to say that, but you need to have some focus and a starting point. And the concepts which we already have on board are those linking this region that you're talking about.
And you kept referring to Ambassador Arikana Chihombori Kwawe, and I'm wondering what role she is playing in this. We know, of course, her activism around trade issues around the African continent, a very, very vocal defense of the need for Africans to come together and make a real difference in their lives. So I want to know, one, what role she's playing, and then secondly, the type of investor that you're targeting on the African continent. Is it me? Is it the institutional investor? Or are you looking at all those reserves that we know African governments are sending into Europe and the US to earn 0%?
Well, you see, we are looking up to Ambassador Kana as a leader of the diaspora, but I could also say the African people, the African voice that heretofore was unheard, to reach out. So it is for us trying to reach out, trying to get her support and to see, because we believe through a person like her, she's a champion of the new, the new conditions for the African people. She's the type of person who has been raising things that I, for one, I worked for the United Nations at a senior level with Kofi Annan, but we are not able to make the kind of breakthrough that she's making in terms of raising the voice that Africa has to move. So it is not to say what role is she going to play, but it is for us, for me as a chair, trying to reach out to her and say, here we have heard you, we are now getting organized. So that is basically, where we are now with the Diaspora Institute. So we are hoping that through, people, leaders of that kind, we will then be able to get this Travaco project off the ground. Can you please repeat your second question, because I sort of missed it?
Yes, the second question was around the type of investor that you are targeting, that you want to invest in it. I was asking the question whether you were looking at me, an ordinary chap, or perhaps you were looking at the big guys who have got those billions of dollars in their funds, or perhaps the central banks who we know have sent a lot of our money out overseas where they are earning very little in returns.
Yeah. First of all, in terms of whom are we targeting? First of all, I would like to say, you having interviewed me, I'm pleased targeting you. So I'm really expecting
Can too.
we shall be sending you our forms to see if you can subscribe. And you see, you start with $1,000 for us is just enough. Is just enough. Because then you bring in your dear wife, she's there, your children, your colleagues. You are looking, you see, this is small, it's beautiful. People don't understand. As I said, Africa now, we have almost 1 billion people. So if we put our act together, you will soon have a fund. As I said, we are going to have a fund management, framework within which people can put in their money. But of course, we are assuring people integrity also. I wouldn't be, I'm a retired UN staff. I wouldn't be here promoting something that was just going to run away with people's money or some Ponzi scheme, as some skeptics keep saying, because the ideas are so new. They are so transformative. It is like Michael Faraday discovering electricity, because the king asked him that what is the use of this? And I think that he replied, Michael Faraday replied, that what's the use of a newborn baby? But it could rise to become a king, it could rise to become a president. So we are targeting the ordinary person, but we're also targeting people who believe in us, but are able to bring in slightly more money than the others. So to answer, we are targeting the people who believe in what we are trying to do.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, Ambassador. I really would have loved to explore further how this connects, for instance, onto the African Free Continental Trade Area, and also how we make sure we build the trust that's necessary to ensure that you are able to get me and my children, and perhaps my friends, as well as Kenneth out in Lagos, and Amin in Cairo, and all those other Africans all over the world. But for today, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We were chatting there to Professor Anna Tibaijuka, the chairperson of Travaco, a bold initiative, as she says, which is trying to harness capital and bring it onto the projects that will enable the transfer of goods and services between Africans on the African continent. It is a long-term project. It is no 100-meter race, but certainly, well, for some of us at least, I think it sounds like perhaps we might be onto the beginning of something. Thank you for watching In Conversation today. Until next time, from Kenneth and myself, goodbye.